And welcome back to Subculture After Dark. Well, we are going to introduce you now to a brand new band. The band is called From a Nightmare, and these guys are seriously experienced musicians from the Baltimore region in the United States. And of course, they've formed a brand new band called From a Nightmare. They've got a brand new album coming out as well. So we thought we would actually get one of the members of the band on the phone right now to chat about this amazing new album. Welcome to the program, Jesse.
Dave, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
No worries. Now, Jesse, tell us a little bit about the band From a Nightmare. Like I said, you guys are all very experienced musicians from the Baltimore area. Tell us a little bit about how the band's formed.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. And real quick, I mean, the band is a conglomerate of some pieces that were around the Baltimore area in the mid-2000s, around that time. Kyle and I, the drummer, and I'm the guitar player, of course, and we've been playing music together since we were 12 years old. So, you know, we can get into a room and play a lot of things. And then we happen to have mutual friends and connections with Steve and Dave, who were also in another project in the Baltimore region in Maryland and out in the Carroll County, which is just north of there. And how it came to be was in 2012, Steve got together with me and we started talking about it, and we didn't do anything with it. And several years later, we formed a 3-song EP that would be the EP that we kind of brought to musicians to see if anybody would want to play with us. And we hit up, our closest friends and musicians that we know would be a good fit for it. Dave and Kyle, and both of them were on board. So in 2017, we formed as a band. We started writing a lot of music. We came out with our first EP as a band in 2018-19, and like many musicians and many people working, COVID kind of put a damper on everything. So we started working remotely on this album. Our brand new album, Doomstate, that just came out on June 7th, and we're excited about it. So that's about it. You know, we're all rock and metal musicians from the area, and like you said, very experienced with also one another, and we've gelled together like brothers that rarely fight. I mean, we all have our differences, but we can come together and do what's best for the band, and we all agree that there's nothing bigger than the band and the show must go on, sort of thing. And we try to do whatever is best for the band with our decision making, but that's pretty much it as far as, where we came from and how we formed.
You mentioned that you and Kyle have been playing music together since you were 12 years old. Tell us a little bit about your journey into heavy music. Were you guys always playing heavy music, or was there a bit of a journey to get into that?
That's pretty wild, Dave. Great question. We started off as Kyle and I started off as a band that really didn't know what the heck we were doing in middle school, right? We
Yep.
just knew we were making noise and we were screaming into the microphone. What style that was, I don't really know. And that developed into a heavy rock project on the cuffs of metal. In the early 2000s, where the band's name was Quarry at the time, and so yes, no, not always heavy. We came from a ska and punk background. I think it's because that's what was easiest for us at the time, right? 3 chords and the truth.
Yep.
And we started writing music in that way, and developed our bonds and our friendships that would stand the test of time, and and then slowly drifted. I remember when Kyle first got his double bass pedal, it was like, what is this thing? What is this? This sorcery. And so we got into playing slightly heavier music, and yeah, that's like I said, we weren't always the heaviest of band, and even today, with some of our peers, we have many peers that we play with in the area that are definitely on the heavier edge than we are, but we bring the power. We really do.
Yep.
You know, a lot of people have described us as power metal and groove metal, and the cuffs of metalcore. And while we don't get into the genre specifics, we write music, for ourselves and stuff. It's kind of been this progression where we just feel like the other thing that made us a little bit heavier, of course, Dave, was we started playing 7-string guitar, and then we started playing 8-string guitar, and it's just this natural progression that got us to where we are today.
I love that you were in a band that didn't really know what you were doing in middle school, because I was the same. We were in a band, we called ourselves the Defendants, and we used to turn up dressed in suits and then play grunge music. No one ever really expected what we were going to do next.
That's great. How was grunge music? I mean, you guys are in Melbourne?
Yes,
right?
Yep.
Yeah, so how was grunge music in Melbourne when you were in the Defendants?
Yeah, it was interesting because we were only young. We were only 14, 15. We thought we were Kurt Cobain, of course, at the time. But we had Silverchair. Yep. We had Silverchair breaking out in Australia at that stage, and that was before they went electro, when they were very, very grunge. So yeah, it was very popular. And in fact, it was interesting because at our high school, we had a high school where most of the kids were into pop music or R&B and stuff like that, and we kind of watched as some of these kids that were into pop or into contemporary rock suddenly switched to being into grunge and alternative, and then that eventually led to them being into metal and punk. So it was actually quite an interesting journey to watch.
Yeah, that's wild. I have spun the Frog Stomp album more times than I can count. I was a big Silverchair fan.
Yeah.
And it hit home here in the States. They had worldwide fame with that album, and man, that was cool, right? Like there was a lot of great songs on that album, but as a guitar player, those songs lent to a bunch of different skill sets. You had to be able to play the split octave chords, and you had to be able to really play clear bar chords, and then they even had great melodies,
Yep.
And I can only imagine with a band coming from your home country and watching them get huge like that, like some of the bands from our area. Good Charlotte's another one that really got famous from our area, and we have a lot of metal stuff that got famous from our area too, but it's just so awesome watching the progression, and you just cheer them on. That had to be really cool for you as young musicians, kind of like, guys, we can do this, right? They're doing it. What's going to stop us from doing it?
Yeah, exactly, because a lot of people don't realize they won a talent show here in Australia, which was very, very early on, and then the next minute they were being played on Triple J, which was the biggest alternative station in Australia. And I think it actually gave a lot of young Aussie bands that kind of feeling of, hey, they're doing it, why can't we? So you kind of saw bands like Jebediah and Grinspoon follow in their footsteps and start getting radio play as well.
Yeah, it paves the way. Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
And that's really cool to hear. Yeah, we were all hooked. Even Kyle and I, we would play as a song's Tomorrow, right? It's song 2 on Frog Stomp.
Yep.
We would play that song all the time. And I still break into it at the campfire when I have my acoustic.
Yeah. So bringing it back to Doomsday, you said that you started working on this album during COVID. That was such a weird time for all musicians. Tell us a little bit about what that was like starting to work on an album during that time.
It was stressful, to say the least, in the very beginning, and we were trying to figure out a way to make it happen because, like many people, we thought the Black Plague was upon us.
Yep.
And I know I speak for the rest of the band when I say that, because we were all like just in this state of just confusion, like how do we keep on doing stuff when people are telling us to stay away from each other and everything else. And eventually, we got to the point where, like, well, if we're gonna get COVID, let's at least we're together. But we wrote the first 3 songs in the studio, and I remember having a conversation with Josh from Dark Hollow Studios in Upper Co, Maryland. We consider him like the 5th member of our band. And I remember having a conversation with him explicitly about, what do we do? You know, this is clearly not stopping. He's like, we'll figure it out. You know, we will figure it out. So you fast forward a couple months, and now we're in April. We're 1 month, you know, March 20th. They basically shut down our country. And we're like, all right. So I was on a work trip in Norfolk, down in Virginia Beach, right near the naval station in Norfolk. You know, people stateside will know what that is. And I wrote 2 songs in a hotel that night, and it was like, you know, I took my interface with me, and I was recording, and I took it back, and it was almost like the fuel to the fire. When we got home, we just started writing like crazy, you know, and we had kind of some songs in pre-production, but there's a program called Audio Movers, and Audio Movers is, I don't know how familiar you are with recording in general. You probably know a little bit about recording, and you know how you have plugins that go right on the channel.
Yep.
When you're recording in pre-production. So Audio Movers is supposed to be lossless audio, where you plug it in on the channel that you're recording, and our producer gets the other chain of that. So he can interrupt our signal before it ever gets to, you know, like, yes, I'm not even hitting record. I'm just playing at home, and he's tracking everything in the studio. Now, lots of bands record on their own gear and their own stuff, and later we would get to that point where the quality of gear that we had would support it, but we had really decent interfaces, and that's about all we had, right? So we were plugging in direct, and he was running us through whatever preamp, you know, whether it was a Stam 1073, you know, a Neve clone or a SSL, depending on what we were doing. And he would run us through Audio Movers and just track everything right in Pro Tools to his studio at home. We had to figure out the lag between the channels. And, you know, we figured that whatever milliseconds it was behind the actual track, it was as simple as sliding it in place.
Wow.
So a lot of people don't know that most of Doomsday, with the exception of 3 songs, was recorded 100% remote.
That's amazing.
Which is just wild, right? And Kyle recorded all of his stuff on a V kit, so like a mesh heads and triggers and all that stuff. And then we actually, all the drums and all the samples in the album were Kyle's actual captured drums blended with some other drums. Like, all right, well, we wanted a good tom sound. So, you know, whether it was Get Good Drums from Nolly and the boys or, you know, a different plugin, we blended Kyle's drums that we had samples of already in the studio, in Dark Hollow Studio. We recorded samples in case we needed them for fills, or that was a bad hit. Let's exchange that take for another, drum hit or whatever we could do. And we were able to piece it all together, man, remote. Yeah, I mean, we recorded from, you know, like many people across the country, they're recording with their friends and bandmates from all the way across the states here, and you know, even across the country, submitting files back and forth. We all recorded from our own homes, and it was just, I guess that lent a lot to the title of the album being Doomsday.
Yep.
And just how in a world of doom and gloom, you're able to overcome it if you just stick your nose to the grindstone, sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned there, like, you were writing, one night you wrote 2 songs. Like, what kind of things were inspiring that? Because I know Home is about being out on tour, and I know Face to Face is about a dream. What kind of things were inspiring the songwriting at that time?
Anxiety, overcoming overcoming the diversity and the battles that come with day-to-day living. We're all dads, right? Let's get down to the brass tacks of it. We're all fathers. We all have kids. And making everything mix together and still having time for family is always a struggle wherever you go. And whether it be work or job or personal life related, I feel like this album came from just perseverance and you know, that night that I was in Norfolk, I walked to, there's a venue in Norfolk, Virginia Beach called the Norva, and it's hosted a lot of big bands that come through there. And I did a little bit of history and learned a little bit about the club, and then also walked around the rest of Norfolk and kind of read the historic signs and the history of the town. And then also knowing that my father was also in the United States Navy, and you know, I visited the Naval Yard, and I was just inspired by history.
Yeah.
You know, and if people today don't know history, we're bound to repeat it. And it was just, I just felt the urge that particular night to just, I needed to write. And I, believe it or not, the song that I wrote in Norfolk, the guitars, I wrote the bass. You know, I take a guitar and a bass with me if I travel for work. And I even program my drums just for writing purposes. But the song that I was really proud about that night was Brick by Brick, right? And so I present these songs to Steve after I write them, or you know, if we're able to get into a room and write them together, which is a lot how we write stuff as well. But this album was kind of written, you know, separate. I present the stuff to Steve, and I hope that my philosophy on songwriting is a song needs to stand on its own, and you kind of got to know what the song is depicting and what the overall feel is of the song. That's kind of going to depict the lyrics, and Steve couldn't have done a better job. You know, he took what I wrote and put it into word form, and it was almost as if my guitar was speaking right through his microphone.
Definitely.
And you said you play guitar. Do you play guitar?
No, I'm a vocalist.
Okay, so but you were in a band, right?
Yeah.
And when you're writing music and stuff, you kind of don't know where the inspiration comes from when it gets flowing.
Yep.
You're caught in this blind pocket of what can I do here? I need to write this, and this stuff comes to you at the weirdest moments, and you're like, that's got to be written down, or I have to hum that tune, or I have to write that lyric. And that's kind of how it was. I was just drawing inspiration from the times we were going through, and we were seeing the world shut down. We were seeing deaths in all the countries, and it had not reached the States yet. And it's like it's only a matter of time, you know, and you're waiting for this storm to brew up on you, so you feel like you got to get it all out at once. I think that's kind of where that came from, where I drew that inspiration to write that stuff from.
Definitely. And so now that the album is out there, what are your plans for the band going forward? Are you hoping to get out there and do some shows? Are you hoping to head internationally? What's the plans now for From a Nightmare?
Well, we're full pedal down, right? We, as a band, I think our hopes are that our first full length gives every listener the ability to find out what From a Nightmare is. And we hope that we're able to tune into our fan base and reach them on a deep level and understand what, you know, what they want, and just, you know, we want this album to pave the way, which is another one of our titles of the song, and this is exactly what it's about, is we want this album to pave the way for our future. So going forward, we want this, you know, we have a big show planned with Awake at Last, American Dream Machine, and Snakes Above, and another local band like us, Distance to Dawn, on July 13th in our area here in Baltimore at Zen West. And we want that to be the start to let everyone know that, hey, From a Nightmare's back, you know, and they're taking it serious, and they're here, you know, they're here to stay. And we want to get out regionally and play in the states surrounding. And we want to keep on going to local shows and support the musicians that come through and build real genuine connections, because again, we took the last 18 months off to make sure that this project was launched the way that we thought we could do the best with the time that we could put in it. And we don't want any time wasted. So I would say mostly, you know, we want to get out and play shows. We want to do a couple weekend runs for the rest of the year, get up, and our big goal is to play a couple festivals. We want to get in front of a lot of people.
Awesome.
And I feel like a festival is a good place to do that.
Definitely. Well, mate, to finish off, what would you like to say to people out there who are about to sit down and take a listen to Doom State for the first time?
That's a loaded question, Dave, but I'll try to make it as short as I can. Guys, this is Jesse with From a Nightmare, and me and my brothers in From a Nightmare want you to take out of this music what it means to you, and we feel that this can be the strength and the courage, music-wise, to get you through what you're going through. We write music from a standpoint of overcoming everyday obstacles and getting through everyday mental health challenges, and we want this to be the light at to get you out of whatever deep, dark place that you might be in, because there's always a brighter side if you can find it. If you can just reach up and find the positive. We hope that this album, it does that for people. We hope that you get into the album. It's a heavy, jam-packed album. You know, there's singing, there's screaming, there's power riffs, there's guitar solos, and there's everything any metalhead would like. And we encourage you to listen to what we offer, and we hope that you like it. From the band and all of us here, we love y'all, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us.